Okay, so we're gonna start with the questions here, the answers to the Vietnam War worksheet that we've been working on. I have graded those. They are in the grade book. I marked them wrong if they were obviously wrong, but I did not highlight the correct answers like I do somehow. So you can go through your document and correct any incorrect answers. You can resubmit those if you want to gain some points back. Those of you who didn't do it, obviously you can fill in the answers and resubmit and get late credit. So we'll get going on this right now. So Vietnam War. All right, so questions 1 and 2. What the regions of Southeast Asia was once known as? The answer should have been B, French Indochina, which is obviously this region here highlighted in a lighter, whatever, yellow color. The conflict in Southeast Asia lasted nearly 30 years, but from 1946 to 1954, it involved which of the following countries? Probably that's a little dead giveaway there, that the answer is C, France. The Vietnam War, the country occupied Indochina during World War II. Again, a little giveaway to the answer there. That would have been Japan. The answer D. French colonial powers in Indochina faced fierce opposition, especially from this country, and that would have been A, Vietnam. Moving on to numbers 5 and 6. Guerrilla fighters in the region who were strongly influenced by communists under the leadership of Ho Chi Minh, who tried to reestablish their control over the region after World War II. Again, a little giveaway here. You get the Vietnam flag here and the French flag there. That would have been France, and letter C. So 5 is C and 6 is C. 7 and 8 here. Nationalists and communists who led the guerrilla forces in Vietnam. The answer would have been B, Ho Chi Minh. And then 8, who did Ho Chi Minh see as the driving force behind successful revolution? The answer would have been rural peasants. Although I did accept, oh, not on this one. This is a different one, sorry. Anyway, so the answer would have been B, rural peasants. Number 9, the results of this battle in 1954 convinced the French to leave Vietnam would have been the Battle of Dien Bien Phu, which is letter A. After the French lost the Battle of Dien Bien Phu, what resulted from the negotiations? It would have been division of Vietnam. Answer would have been A. So both 9 and 10 would be A. Number 11, which of the following is correctly matched? It would have been Diem and corruption, letter C. First major direct U.S. military activity in Vietnam would have not been what many people answered, the Gulf of Tonkin. It would have been Operation Rolling Thunder, first direct military activity. 11 and 12. So 11 is C and 12 is D. Number 13, communist group that formed to resist Japanese occupation during World War II. Welcome non-communists who were committed to independence. The answer is C, Viet Minh. But in your document, I noticed that a lot of people answered Viet Cong, and I actually gave credit for that if you did. 14, choose the correct chronological order for these events, highlighting the correct answer from the choices provided. The answer would have been C. So the answer in order would be C, A, B, and D. So C is Japanese occupation. That was in 1945-ish, from 42 to 45 probably. A, Dien Bien Phu is 1954. Letter B would have been Operation Rolling Thunder, 1964. And the Tet Offensive would have been 1968. So the letter C would have been the answer. Same type of answer, or same type of question here. Just obviously different order. Your answer should have been D. In order, it goes A, C, D, and B. A, French involvement in Vietnam dates back to the 1800s, 1880s. Japanese occupation of Vietnam, again, 1942 to 1945-ish. D, Vietnam is divided, 1954. And then U.S. involvement in Vietnam, you could argue late 1950s into the early 60s. So again, the answer would have been D. And then 16 is the same type of question, different things here. The answer would have been B, and the chronological order was D, A, B, and C. D is Vietnam divided. That's 1954. A would have been Gulf of Tonkin, 1964. B, Tet Offensive, would have been 1968. Paris Peace Accords, I believe, was 1975. Those three questions are all chronological order questions, and you will see those on next Friday's test. So a week from, well, I'm making this on Friday. So Friday, the 26th of April would be your test on Vietnam. Based on the graph in 2008, the answer would have been A, people supported congressional approval before sending troops in. So 2008 obviously is this poll right here. And you can see yes needs congressional approval, and the overwhelming majority is saying yes, they do. Based on the graph in 1973, so this graph, you have a very similar response. So again, A, people supported congressional approval before sending troops into action outside the United States. Again, remembering that during the Gulf of Tonkin resolution, President Johnson was given the authority to send troops into battle without war being declared. So this is kind of what this is supporting. When comparing the results from 2008 to 1973, so when you look at these two graphs, you'll obviously recognize that they're almost identical. So letter C would have been the answer. Moving on here. Using information from the graph, which year did U.S. have the most troops in Vietnam? Your answers would have been based on the bar graph here with the years under here. You can see that each year it skips 2. So it goes from 61 to 63, 63 to 65. So these lines in between would have been the even years, just if you weren't reading that well. So the answer to number 20 would have been C, 1968, which would have been this year right here. Number 21, the answer would have been C5. So it's asking you how many years did U.S. have more than 300,000 troops? So here's 300,000 troops. So you're looking at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. Using information in the graph, what year did U.S. first have more than 100,000 troops into Vietnam? There's 100,000 troops, and your answer would have been B, 1965, the first year that they surpassed 100,000 troops. These are definitions here of these individual situations. Some of these we've already covered in various ways, but you can see domino theory suggested communist government in one nation would quickly lead to communist takeovers in neighboring states. The old domino theory, once one falls, the rest fall. Viet Cong, armed communist organization in South Vietnam, also found in Laos and Cambodia. It fought under the direction of the North Vietnamese, and they were supplied as well by the North Vietnamese, and they fought against the South Vietnamese government or army as well as U.S. troops. Gulf of Tonkin resolution authorized by President Johnson to take all necessary measures to repeal any armed attack against forces of the United States and to prevent further aggression by communist government of North Vietnam. This was the kind of the blank check that President Johnson received in order to send more supplies and more importantly, troops into Vietnam, 1964, 1965. Go back to that chart we saw. 1965 was the first year that they had over 100,000 troops in Vietnam. The Tet Offensive, we'll cover this more, a little bit more detail next week. But this was a coordinated series of attacks by the North Vietnamese and Viet Cong of more than 100 cities and other military outposts in South Vietnam. It marked a turning point in the war. Not that it was a victory for the North Vietnamese and Viet Cong, because it really wasn't. Initially, they did have some success, but when it was all said and done, the American troops had reclaimed most of the land that had been lost. But what it did do is it really started to turn public opinion against the United States involvement in Vietnam. This is the time period where the anti-war protests started to increase. We'll watch this video clip when I get back on Tuesday, but pretty significant event in terms of turning points in Vietnam.
The Tet Offensive.
Stop that. All right, U.S. Maddox, that was the ship that was involved in the Gulf of Tonkin incident where they had kind of mistakenly, reported that a North Vietnamese torpedo boat had attacked, when in essence it was probably a misread radar situation. However, it's the ammunition that President Johnson needed to be able to launch troops into Vietnam. 28, pacification was the goal to kind of win the hearts and minds of the South Vietnamese people, which was a totally blotched situation by the U.S. government. I don't know what they were thinking when they thought that, because the South Vietnamese people really they didn't care much about Americans being there. They didn't want them there in the first place. And a lot of this was where they were literally trying to relocate farmers and village peoples because they were under, in a dangerous area that could involve them being involved in an attack or a conflict. They were trying to be, peaceful, but the Vietnamese people didn't understand, and they thought they were being taken away or sent to a prison camp or something. So it was really, in essence, their hearts and minds of the American leadership was in the right place, but it was just not real strategically sound. It was a failure in terms of like a lot of things in Vietnam, unfortunately, were. Why did the Tet Offensive was such an important event? As we kind of mentioned this earlier, but it turned public opinion against U.S. involvement, and it really intensified the anti-war protest, especially on U.S. college campuses. Besides the Tet Offensive, what other two factors contributed to anti-war opinion? Television networks were reporting directly from Vietnam, so the government couldn't falsify or maybe mislead the American public about what was happening because the public was watching it literally in the nightly news. And it also, President Johnson and his administration received a significant amount of criticism for their policies in Vietnam, to the point where Johnson basically said, I'm not going to run for president. I'm not running for re-election. He basically quit. I mean, he didn't resign, but you get what I'm saying. He didn't want to run. It's the only president I can remember in modern times who was elected and was the incumbent president and didn't run again. That doesn't happen very often. Number 31, why was Agent Orange and napalm used by the United States? Well, it was a jungle terrain, very difficult to locate the enemy when they're hiding in the jungle and hiding in the dense vegetation. So they thought, hey, if Agent Orange was a pesticide, it was a kind of a weed killer type of thing. They thought they could kill the vegetation, and napalm is basically liquid fire, and they would burn off the vegetation. What they found later on that both of those things caused a lot of health issues for U.S. veterans that had come in contact with it. And what was the unintended effect of American bombing campaign in late 1968? Significant increase in anti-war protests, especially, as I mentioned, on college campuses. The increased bombing campaign of 1968 under President Nixon, who's now president, was kind of done in secrecy, where Nixon had campaigned that he was going to pull the United States out of Vietnam, and he did. He actually did pull troops out, but he increased the bombing campaigns and didn't let anybody know he was really doing it. So it really kind of, once the news got out, it was, again, another kind of black eye against the U.S. government. 33, where did Ho Chi Minh Trail originate? The answer would have been up in this region here in North Vietnam. Letter C, how many countries did it involve? Well, you can see here it involved 1, 2, Laos, 3, South Vietnam, and 4, Cambodia. You can see here this is a river. I think a lot of people mistook this for the border, but the actual border is right there. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4 countries. The letter would have been 4A, and then it ended here along the Saigon area, where it ends, and C would have been the answer to that. So those are your answers. Those of you who had incorrect answers, good idea to correct those and maybe resubmit them if you want to gain a couple points back. Those of you who didn't do it, or maybe didn't do a lot of it, obviously it's important for you to fill in those answers, resubmit it, and get late points back for those. I'll be back tomorrow, which we'll get into. Tomorrow originally said it was going to be a makeup day. I changed my mind because I'm not here today. So we're going to do the makeup day to Wednesday, actually. So tomorrow we'll lecture outline on and watch the video on the Tet Offensive. And then again, as I mentioned earlier, the test for chapter 19 will be Friday, this Friday, the 26th. Also, I posted a note-taking exercise for section 4 of chapter 19. I also have hard copies for those, so those are available as well. Otherwise, if you have any questions, just send me an email, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.